Oh, somehow my video went off on that one. Hey, Donna.
Donna, you're muted.
Hello.
Hi, Donna.
Sorry about that. Having technical difficulties. Too much technology going on.
Good to meet you, even though it's by, remote. You can probably see Dr. David Reed too, Donna, up there.
Hi, David.
Hi.
And so I want to get this dissertation started. We've waited a long time. Elise has waited a long time for this day. We've been through many ups and downs, and then right at the end, COVID. So this will be a memorable defense for her. And I'd like to welcome all the guests. They are appropriately, I don't know if Elise, you have control of them, but everybody's muted. But I think we will probably have time, but we will at the very end allow any of the guests who'd like to ask Elise a question to do that. And that we hope Elise will maintain you on mute until that time. Even though I know her family's probably cheering. So the process for today is, I want to ask Elise a question to get her started. And then she'll tell us about her research. We told her she had about 30 minutes to do that. And then we'll ask some questions. And like I said, then time at the end for anyone who's here in the audience to ask Elise any questions. So I just thought I would ask you an easy question to start out with, Elise, and just ask you to tell us a little bit about how you got to this day. What brought you to Seton Hall? And how did you manage to do what many students don't do, and that is get to this dissertation defense day?
Well, thank you. So how I got to Seton Hall was very unique. As Maureen knows, when I first started at the Office of Catholic Schools, I'm responsible for the recruitment, onboarding, retention of principals. And so one of the things that I'm responsible for is university partnerships when it comes to Catholic school training. And so Maureen had reached out to Dr. Rigg, who's on this call, and she was just asking about our interest in programs through Seton Hall. And so the email got sent to me, and I met with Maureen, and we were talking a little bit about the Catholic school program. And while that wasn't necessarily a fit for us, what was a fit for me was the executive EDD program. And so I got more information about it, did some research. It was an awesome fit for me. And the interesting thing was I had never set foot in New Jersey before my first day of class at Seton Hall. And I was one of two people from out of the state of New Jersey in the cohort. So it was just a really interesting, it was a great experience though. I absolutely loved my time at Seton Hall. I'm very, very grateful. I have to say, friends and family and the support of really, really great professors with Maureen's support, Dr. Reed's support, Donna's support, and the support of my friends and family and my husband just got me to this day. Our cohort at Seton Hall was wonderful. It's a great model. So that's a little bit about just how I got here.
Do I recognize some of the cohort here in the audience?
No.
I thought I did.
Yeah, there might be one or two joining us a little bit later, but I know they were doing some administrator things in their buildings today. So. All
right. So Elise, why don't you get started? We'll let you take it from here. And I know that Dr. Reed gave you some suggestions, and we talked about what we want you to emphasize. So why don't you get started?
Great. All right. Okay. Okay. Can everybody see my screen?
Yeah.
And it's a full screen with the presentation? Okay,
yes.
Great. Wonderful. Okay. So just to get us started, obviously this is my dissertation defense presentation. My name is Elise Dite. And today we're talking about the recruitment and retention of Catholic school principals and the importance of school leadership in the success of Catholic schools. We've already introduced the committee, but I wanted to take a minute to introduce everybody again. Dr. Maureen Gillette has served as my mentor and the first reader for the dissertation. And very, very grateful for her help and guidance along the way and through this process. Dr. David Reed is the second reader on this on the dissertation, and again, very, very grateful to him for his support, especially around qualitative research. And the third reader is Dr. Donna Keel. She's a professor at DePaul, and I've again been so grateful for her help and her guidance through this process as well. So thank you to all of you for your support. Just as an overview for this presentation, it will consist of the following. So we'll talk a little bit about the problem statement, the research questions, the purpose of the study, the significance of the study, some of the influential literature, the methods, results, and recommendations. So for the problem statement, over the past several years, research has established that strong school leaders are essential to school success, and it's difficult to recruit qualified principal candidates in public and private schools. Catholic schools are additionally challenged to find faith leaders for their schools. Because of the high demand for Catholic school principals and the specific qualification that school principals must be practicing Catholics, Catholic schools are experiencing a principal shortage. So in order to discover why principals seek positions in Catholic schools, why they stay principals in their schools, and why they leave, the following research questions were developed. So what factors influence candidates' decisions to seek a principal position at a Catholic school? What factors influence the principal's decision to remain a leader in a Catholic school? And why do Catholic school principals leave their schools? And for the purpose of this study explores the research questions and will help schools and dioceses across the country recruit and retain excellent principal leaders. It is necessary for Catholic schools to ensure the Catholic faith is passed on to the next generation and to ensure that students are receiving a high-quality academic education. Strong leaders are necessary for Catholic schools to achieve this goal. This study will add to the literature by exploring ways a diocese can continue to attract and retain high-quality leaders. This study will provide a framework for dioceses and pastors across the United States to hire new principals. And some of the influential literature that was examined for this study is as follows. The first book by Bright, Lee, and Holland, Catholic Schools and the Common Good, is a discussion of Catholic schools throughout history and discusses the importance of them moving forward. Brittany and Garnett in Lost Classroom, Lost Community, Catholic Schools' Importance in Urban America discuss the importance of Catholic schools in their surrounding neighborhoods. They also describe the effect of closing Catholic schools and how that influenced the community around it. So oftentimes when a Catholic school closed, they saw an increase in crime and an increase also in unemployment, and there was less community involvement when that Catholic school closed. But they did not find any similarities between public or charter schools. So they didn't find that had the effect that a closing Catholic school did in a neighborhood. Father Michael Caruso, in his book, When the Sisters Said Farewell, The Transition of Leadership in Catholic Elementary Schools, outlines the transition of Catholic school leadership from orders of nuns and sometimes brothers to lay people. And the last two documents on the slide are church documents that support the need for strong Catholic schools. So this study uniquely focuses on the pastor-principal relationship. My apologies, we live by a firehouse. Just a second. Okay. This study study focuses on the pastor-principal relationship and the importance of faith leadership. The researchers and I worked in the current context of the parish school structure, and the results of the study focus on the importance of fit and relationship building. So in this study, I interviewed 6 principals and 6 pastors in Central Catholic Diocese. This was a narrative inquiry which details the specific experiences of individuals and what they think about their situation. So the focus of it really is on each individual and how they view their world. The interviews were semi-structured interviews where I asked the same or similar questions of each interviewee, but if there was some clarity needed, I would ask them to clarify a certain point. And for the selection of study participants, I conducted an analysis of the schools in Central Catholic Diocese, and I analyzed the percentage of students who were eligible for free and reduced lunch. I took a look at school size and student race and ethnicity. And after completing that analysis, I found that about 51% of schools in that diocese were between 0 and 10% free and reduced lunch. Their student population was over 50% Caucasian. And of those schools, 60% of them had over 300 students and 40% had less than 300 students. So 2 schools with over 300 students and 1 school with less than 300 students was chosen for this study. Only 7% of schools had free and reduced lunch rates between 10 and 30%. So there were not any schools in that category that were chosen for the study. 15% of the schools had free and reduced lunch rates between 30 and 60%, were over 50% Hispanic and had less than 300 students. So 1 school was chosen in that category. And then finally, 24% of schools had free and reduced lunch rates of over 60%, were over 50% Hispanic, and had less than 300 students. So 2 schools were chosen in that category. And then, of course, there were a few schools who didn't fit into any of those categories, but the vast majority fit into one of these that are listed here. So in order to select the participants, email solicitations were sent to principals who were in those categories, and principals who responded positively were included in the study on a first-come, first-served basis. And you can see here a little bit about the participants. So we have a list of the different participants. We have their pastor names next to them, school and parish names, as well as their experience in their current school, and then their years overall as administrators. And the years overall as administrators included both previous principal experience as well as experience as an assistant principal or perhaps as a dean of students or something else along those lines. You see here also a list of the schools and their school names, the student demographics, and then the school size. Also their free and reduced lunch status there on the screen as well that I talked about a little bit earlier. So the interviews were conducted, they were recorded using an application called Otter, and then they were transcribed by me. And the interviews were then analyzed using a program called Deduce for analysis. And I examined the data and looked for some patterns and determined topics based on those patterns. So there are a couple of types of codes that were used, and this is Deduce's language. Parent codes were the overarching themes that emerged from the interview data, and those were frequently mentioned by pastors and principals. And the parent codes that emerged were relationships, support, faith, and challenges of the principalship. And then there were also some more specific codes that emerged called child codes from the parent codes upon further analysis. And there were several of those. The ones with more than 20 mentions included support from parents and fit for the position. And then once the interviews were coded, they were analyzed using Deduce's qualitative charts function. And what that function did was it gave who expressed which code in the interview, how many times, and then a number of times that those were expressed as well. And then after analyzing the frequency of each code, I further analyzed the quotes using the matching excerpts function in Deduce, and that allowed me to see specifically what each person said, each interviewee said about that specific code. Once the quotes under each code were analyzed, I tabulated the findings and then determined the overarching themes that were used to answer the research questions, which I'll talk about in just a minute. After the data were analyzed, they were also triangulated using various school documents. And those documents included principal performance reviews and the supporting document with those performance reviews, documents and communication that were available on the school's website and Facebook page, and annual parish reports when those were available. The pastor responses also provided triangulation, especially in the discussion of the pastor-principal relationship. And so the results of the study are as follows. For the first research question, what factors influence candidates' decisions to seek a principal position at a Catholic school? Two themes emerged. The first theme was desire to work in Catholic schools, and the second theme was specific skill fit for the community. Principals felt that they could address student needs better through the lens of faith. Their personal needs as leaders were met because they could lean into their personal faith and educate students in all facets of development. This finding was triangulated with pastor interviews and data from performance reviews. Pastors discussed the importance of faith leadership in their interviews, and performance reviews, newsletters, and social media posts from the principals highlighted the importance of the Catholic faith to them. And with some of this sample data, I just wanted to pause and read one of the quotes from Principal Sandra Smith. This is one of my favorite quotes. She stated, "Now having had the experience of working in Catholic schools, I don't think I could ever go public again. There's something about being able to place God at the center and share that with students and share that with families and have the kids really come into a relationship with Jesus. That's such a special thing that I don't think I could ever work in a public school again." For the second theme, specific skill fit for the community, principals felt that they were unique fits for their community due to their personal knowledge or abilities. And the pastors concurred, stating they felt their principal was a good fit for their school. Principals felt unique skills like the ability to speak Spanish, knowledge of the community, work with ELL students, strong continuity with parents around philosophy of education, or a strong academic background made them a fit for their specific school. Here, Maria Jackson and Father Simon both discuss her fit for the school in this quote, and I'll leave this up for just a second. Maria Jackson discusses her expertise in working with the ELL community, and Father Simon states that she has an understanding of family needs and backgrounds, and he feels that she's uniquely positioned to move the school forward. I'll leave that there for just a second before we go on to the second research question. Okay. And then for the second research question, what factors influence a principal's decision to remain a leader in Catholic schools? There were three themes that emerged as an answer to this research question. The first theme was pastor-principal relationship. The second theme was relationship with parents. And the third theme was relationships with faculty and staff. For the first theme, pastor-principal relationship, the pastor-principal relationship was an essential component of principal satisfaction. All cited the importance of trust and building a relationship with one another, and they also discussed the need for clear boundaries, ensuring the pastor has the information he needs while not overloading him with minutia. There's an example of that in the data here, and I'll leave this up for a second as well. In the these quotes, Linda Wilson discusses how she wanted to ensure she engaged her pastor only for items that were important or urgent. She said she fosters a relationship with her pastor to give him an opportunity to provide advice and guidance. Father James concurred, stating that she does a good job of keeping small items away from him, but also knows when to engage him for help. He mentioned that he's happy with their collaborative relationship, and never feels blindsided. I'll leave that there for just a second before moving on. For the second theme, relationships with parents, principals spoke of satisfaction with building collaborative relationships with parents. They described frequent, varied communication with their stakeholders, and their descriptions were supported by evidence from the school website, parish bulletins, and evidence from principal performance reviews. In these quotes from Linda Wilson and Mary Davis, both principals focus on the importance of building and developing relationships with parents, and they also talked about the importance of listening to their ideas. I'll leave that for just a second. And then finally, for the third theme, relationships with faculty and staff, mentoring faculty and staff was also a source of satisfaction for the principals, including in providing teachers with methods and training to best educate students. They were commended in their performance reviews for providing mentoring and instructional leadership for their teachers. And in the data, Maria Jackson and Jennifer Williams both offer examples of how they enjoy coaching and mentoring teachers, helping them to excel in the classroom and as school leaders. And leave that up for just a second. And then for research question number 3, why do Catholic school principals leave their schools? None of the principals stated they would leave their positions soon. However, one theme did emerge for an answer to this question, and that was finances, enrollment, and salary. Pastors and principals expressed concerns around finances and enrollment. The higher the school enrollment, most of the time, the less financial pressure exists in the school. Schools also tend to be a large percentage of the parish budget. The school budget was at least 55% of the overall parish budget in the parish budgets I was able to analyze. And pastors and principals expressed concerns over cost and wages for teachers. However, three of the six principals mentioned in the interviews that they took a pay cut to work in their position as principals in the Central Catholic Diocese, and they were happy with their choice. So this finding does illustrate that principal salary may not be as significant of a deterrent in recruitment and retention of principals as some other researchers have described. In some of the data, Linda Wilson, Father Thomas, and Father Andrew all expressed worries and challenges with the enrollment and finances in their schools in their quotes. I'll leave that there for just a second. And now we're going to move on to some recommendations. So the following recommendations discuss the implications for literature, as well as some of the implications for practice. So some of the implications for literature. First one is faith commitment. Principals expressed that they wanted to work in Catholic schools so they could openly practice their faith and pass the faith on to the next generation of Catholics. This desire was part of their educational philosophy and they felt faith practice enabled them to educate the whole child. Fit for the position also emerged as a significant implication for the literature. Each principal believed they possessed skills that were a unique fit for the community where they were hired. Their skills varied, as did the needs of their community, but they felt uniquely gifted to move their communities forward. And then finally, relationship building also emerged as a strong theme from the literature. Each principal also discussed the essential nature of building relationships with stakeholders, especially their pastor, teachers, and principals, or teachers and parents. Positive interactions encourage them to accept a position in their school, and positive relationships with stakeholders, especially their pastor, encourage them to stay. So some of the implications for practice, and these will be implications for practice both at a diocesan level as well as a local level in pastor hiring. The first piece would be to create a value proposition at the diocesan level. And that value proposition can focus on faith leadership and calling, should describe the intrinsic benefits of working in a Catholic school, especially when it comes to educational philosophy, the ability to share faith and educate the whole child, focus on community, and focus on fit. We've also created a framework for principal hiring with 4 essential factors. And those 4 essential factors are also guided by 4 essential questions. So for disposition of faith, one can ask, does the candidate express personal dispositions of faith that reveal faith as central to lifestyle? In call to serve, does the candidate express a calling to Catholic school leadership? In relational leadership, does the candidate demonstrate a disposition for relational leadership with all stakeholders, especially the pastor? And then finally, in skills, does the candidate possess the skills necessary to advance the school's mission? When interviewing principal candidates for an opening, pastors and other hiring managers can keep the following points in mind. First of all, they'll want to create interview questions focusing on personal faith practice, and leadership in a Catholic school. They'll want to determine the principal traits, skills, and strengths that are essential to successfully move the vision of the school forward. And then after an initial interview with the pastor and search committee, they'll want to engage finalists in a one-on-one interview with the pastor to ensure a good relationship fit between pastor and principal. Creating a list of ideal traits for the next principal can help schools and communities decipher the essential skills for the next principal. A sense of skill fit led to higher principal satisfaction in their position and also led them to feeling a sense of belonging in their communities. There's also some pieces around retention here. So dioceses and pastors can also continue to encourage principals to receive training and encouragement around continuing to build those strong relationships with the pastor, the community, and teachers. And then finally, some suggestions for future research. A future quantitative study could provide further information on principal motivation around recruitment and retention with a larger sample size. Conducting research on principal candidates seeking a principal position could also provide some more insights on why they choose to seek Catholic school principal positions. And a researcher could also conduct a more in-depth study with principals who are new to a diocese or a school by interviewing them year over year regarding their decisions to remain principals or leave their positions. And I believe I stopped sharing my screen, so.
Thank you very much, Elise. I'm going to open it up to Donna and Dave for questions.
Dave, do you want to go first, or would you like?
Go right ahead. I'll go second.
Thank you. So first of all, Elise, thank you so much. That was an outstanding presentation of an important body of research for our Catholic schools, and your work is excellent. It's on target. I think one thing that occurred to me as you were going through the discovery of what the principals saw as essential to their role and why their role was successful is I wondered if you came across anything in your interview around principals who perhaps had some challenges and were able to overcome those. Were they able to, like, if they did not feel there was a fit, were the factors that you discovered as making the fit work, were those the things that helped them along, or did that even come up?
It didn't come up much, but one of the things the principals did say was that they really leaned into their faith when they were met with some challenges. So there was one particular principal who had a lot of challenges at the beginning of the school year that I had spoken to. I spoke to her later in the school year. And she talked about those, but she said that she really leaned into her faith, and she also really leaned into the strong relationship that she had with her pastor to address that challenge that she faced. And it was a big challenge. She really faced a very, very big challenge. So
that's interesting. So it's congruent then with what brought her, kept her.
Yeah. Yes.
Great. Dave?
Sorry, I was on mute again. Yeah, so Elise, I agree. I think you've done a really nice job on this, and I think we started working on this initially a couple summers ago together when we had that first class together. So this has really come a long way, and you should be commended for your work, and Dr. Gillette too, for I know she's provided a lot of good guidance for you. But this is really good. I think it's really well organized, and I mean, one thing that I look for in all of these defenses are, that you clearly address all of your research questions, which I think you've done a really nice job. I mean, it's very clear to me that you, and I've said this to you previously, but this idea of principals pursuing, remaining and leaving and in the Catholic schools is, I think you answered, or at least addressed, I don't want to say answered, but addressed all of these questions in your findings. One suggestion that I had, and I think that you could do add a little bit more maybe in your chapter 5, is you really do a good job emphasizing what Catholic schools could look for in potential principal candidates and what they might do as far as their hiring process, and you showed us a nice conceptual framework. But I think you could highlight even a little bit more this idea of the principal-pastor relationship and the potential, kind of like what would aspiring principals in Catholic schools, how could you sell the position to them? Because it's such a challenge to potentially attract principals into these positions at Catholic schools, what are these individuals who might occupy these positions looking for? And it seems like, at least based on your study, that one of the essential relational elements is this relationship between the pastor and the principal. Like once principals are on board, they have a pretty good relationship, and this helps these individuals potentially stay in these roles. So that could be something really to sell, because I don't know if there's a direct, I mean, all of my research takes place in traditional public schools, so I don't think there's like a direct comparison to principals who work in, like there's the superintendent, of course, and stuff, but it's not as intimate, it seems like, as it might be. Work. So I think one way you could recommend is that Catholic schools kind of promote this idea for aspiring principals who might be good candidates, kind of to sell it to them that this is a potential benefit of working in these schools. I think just like a paragraph or something kind of highlighting that idea, like from the other perspective, would be a good addition.
Great, thank you.
So, I want to add on to Dave a little bit, because one of the reasons, so in Elise's program, students kind of get assigned a mentor. You don't wander the halls like I did looking for someone, who will work with you. But one thing that was intriguing to me about this was that I was a Catholic school teacher for 11 years with two different pastors and two completely different experiences. One not so hot and one very, very gratifying and wonderful. And I wasn't a principal, I was only a teacher. And so, when Dave asked this question, I think it's it's really, really an important question. And one thing you didn't talk about today, which I think you did a really good job of, was situating your study and why it's important in the Catholic documents that provide the rationale for why we even have Catholic schools and what is their role in the church. But that brings me to the question that was a little bit surprising to me, and maybe it shouldn't be, maybe things are different today, that there seemed to be such a good relationship between all 6 principals and pastors, and that's not always the case. And I mean, you can't, as a researcher, go looking for the bad examples. You know, I mean, I was gratified to hear that, but did it lead you to any thinking about, you're in a position to see many more principals, and so is Jim, who's listening, I think. You know, for pastors who might not be as effective in working with their principals or provide that support through the hard times, I've been very interested, as you know, Elise, because I had you give a presentation to them, in thinking about how do we help pastors who don't have a lot of experience or training in the world of education select and support their principals in a better way.
Yeah, I think that the framework is a start. I think that giving them that framework to start, giving them an opportunity, you know, showing them some of the questions that they can ask. And one of the things that came out from the interviews that was really, really interesting was the pastors that I talked to really did have a realization of the fact that they were not educators, and they trusted their principal to handle the educational side of everything that was going on. That was something that came up over and over in the interviews. So I think having that trust situation and asking the pastor to trust their principal as the educational professional, but then also giving them those really great opportunities to collaborate around the faith, because the goal is the same. Everybody wants the students in the Catholic schools to continue their faith journey, and they're educating the next generation of Catholics in the faith, but also while providing that excellent Catholic education. So I think having that training for pastors would be key, and maybe digging into that a little bit more would be really good. But in talking to the pastors, it really was interesting that many of them called that out for themselves as something that was a challenge for them, but also they did express how much they trusted their principal to make those educational decisions.
It's also a statement about the good relationship between these principals and their pastors, because sometimes pastors don't always realize how hard the principal's job is unless there is that good relationship there happening. So, and I thought your point about the value proposition was excellent. I mean, one place where this shows is, it leads me to wonder, you know, do pastors really know how to interview candidates for principal jobs, given this dual nature of academic achievement and Catholic faith formation? And the notion of constructing a value proposition, I think, and an understanding of the collaborative nature of their work, because ultimately the pastor is a decision maker.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yes. Yeah, absolutely.
I had another it's more of a technical question, and you wrote about it, Elise, but you didn't mention it. I just thought it'd be useful to bring up. Can you talk a little bit, because you know your research is qualitative and you rely so heavily on the interviews, can you talk a little bit about how you followed up with your participants and what steps you had in place to make sure that you were accurately portraying everything they said in your writing?
Yes, so the way that I followed up with the participants was I actually sent them a copy of Chapter 4 and asked them to comment whether or not that this accurately represented what they said. And I didn't have anybody who came back and said, no, make this correction, or I disagree, or anything like that. It was, you know, the ones, some responded, some didn't, which was fine. But they did, nobody mentioned that they felt like it didn't accurately represent what they said.
Great, thanks.
Elise, can I ask another? You did some great thought thinking around future research potential. And I think, the interesting thing for you is that during your research, COVID and systemic racism have, plagued our country and certainly been impacting our Catholic schools. As you think about, those future potential research opportunities or connections to what you've learned, are there things that you have thought about, even in addition to those, that would be influenced by what we see happening in our country and in our schools now? Are there either elements of issues around racism or around the way that we navigate online worlds that has occurred to you in the principal hiring proposition?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. First of all, I think that when it comes to the pieces around systemic racism, I think if principals can lean on their Catholic faith, they can lean on Catholic teaching, and they can teach students through that lens, we can again hit the holistic education piece that I talked about a little bit earlier. Principals, I'm sure, will need additional training to do this, but I think the ability to lean on the Catholic faith will help with that. And I've talked to some principals about that they feel as if the ability to lean on faith has helped them with those conversations. And then I think with the recruitment pieces, and with the advent of COVID and just talking to principals about how they have been so stressed out over these past several months they're basically managing two schools in many cases. So they're managing an in-person school along with an online school, and they're managing challenges that they don't have the answer to. So people ask them questions and principals are used to having the answer and they don't have the answer. So thinking around, what are some ways that a central office or what are some ways that pastors can support their principals through these kinds of challenges and offer them more training, I think would be key. So anything that they can do socially and emotionally for the principals would be wonderful. And I also think too that the principals, so many of the principals, because they're so driven by relationships, they want their teachers to be happy. They want their parents to be happy. They want to keep managing. They want to keep building those positive relationships, and managing through this crisis that we're managing through right now has also, I think, been very, very challenging for them emotionally. So I don't know that I really have an answer to that question so much as I think it's something that we really need to be aware of and need to have a lens for.
Yeah, it sounds like what you're saying, which is what my own instinct is in dealing with schools, and even when we look at DePaul University at our own principal prep program, is that one of the key factors is just that emotional resiliency, both in preparing our Catholic school principals, but also in when we hire them. It's, our faith is central to that emotional resiliency, and making that connection between emotional resiliency and faith might be future research. To be able to, how do you just really deeply not see those as separate buckets, but see them as one, especially when you're leading? So I think what you're saying is extraordinarily compelling and important to the field.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Other questions before we open it up and see if anybody in the audience would like to ask a question? So I had one last question. It's always difficult for me. I feel at this late stage in my life that, when I was 20 and retirement seemed, 50 years away, working in a Catholic school had a lot of benefits. One of them was not salary. And so, or retirement. And so I see the principals and I realize that, many of them have a penchant from the public school system, but it would be nice to get effective principals earlier and not as a second career job almost. But is there anything, I was thinking about a project we did when I was in Chicago at Northeastern with the Alternative Schools Network, because they had a huge problem with, they were able to hire teachers, remember, under the old House rules, the old House checkbox, not certified if they met the House standard, and then they had 2 years to get certified. And then as soon as they got certified, they would leave for the public school. So we did like multiple cohorts of principal prep, just doing teacher leader prep and principal prep. And I'm wondering if there's an opportunity for principals to do like what you did and get an EDD, or to get some other type of credential, a special ed credential, or is there something besides increased salary that would be a perk for them? I mean, that's more than a perk, but something that would mitigate that feeling like I do all this work and I'm not being compensated, in a way that makes me, I mean, none of them planned on leaving in your study, and that's wonderful, but it would be nice if they had some thing there that made them feel like all this work they're doing, which is a lot, is rewarded.
Yeah, I think, we've definitely investigated that on the diocesan level. We haven't, it's been difficult to find funding for it. So I think that's been one of the biggest challenges. But I think there's also ways to, one of the things that we're looking at is doing some principal awards. So we do some of those. Principals also have some leadership opportunities as well, to be able to get, to be able to join some councils and give feedback to folks who are in the diocesan office. So there's some leadership opportunities for them there. They also do get a stipend. It's a small stipend per year to be able to continue education. So I did talk to a principal the other day who was able to get an LBS 1, and she's somebody who already has a doctorate. So there's those kinds of opportunities I would like to see more personally. Right now, at least from our perspective, we focus more on helping teacher candidates become principals. But I would like to see something like that down the road of some more benefits for our current sitting principals as well as an incentive.
Great. Well, I will let you take your audience off mute and see if anybody has any questions before Dave, Donna, and I go do our little meeting. Or maybe they want to raise their hand. They could use the raise their hand function. You have an audience full of shy people?
I don't know about that, but.
Well, normally I have a lot of wait time. I was a former middle school teacher, but I don't know about your audience. So I don't know.
I just saw Dr. Rigg on mute, so.
I was going to say, I don't want to mess anything up. That's why I'm hesitating. So.
You're not going to mess anything up on this end.
Knowing my luck, I would be the one to throw off Elise's chances here, and I don't want to be that guy,
All right, well, Dave, Donna, and I will go confer, and then you can say what you want to say afterwards, Jim. All right, so Dave, Donna, and I set up a whole separate meeting, so you can stay and talk with your guests, Elise, and we'll go out and we'll come back in. So don't leave us out there hanging when you see we want to come back, okay?
Okay.
All right. All right.
Okay. Is that everybody? Okay. There we go. Okay.
We're back. Well, I am happy to tell you that you have passed with minor revisions, most of which you already know.
Yay!
You can unmute everybody so they can clap for you. We think you did an outstanding job, Elise, and you have most of my revisions, and Dave just has a couple, which you should be able to get through this week, so I don't think it's any big deal. We are thrilled for you. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Dr. Dykes.
Thank you. Yay! Thank you so much. Thank you. Yay! Thank you so much to everybody. Just been so grateful and humbled for everyone's support, and thank you to everybody who joined us today. This has been just wonderful to have you all here and share this experience with you. Again, as I mentioned before, Brendan has been just amazingly supportive. So, and my family and friends and just people throughout the Archdiocese who've been so helpful. Jim Rigg was on earlier. He's been extremely supportive in this process too. So, just it's just been wonderful. So thank you. Thanks,
Well,
everybody.
you're my first student at Seton Hall, so I'm thrilled.
Yay! Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
And I look
And
forward
thank you,
to-
Maureen and Dave.
Yeah.
Yes,
Thank you.
Yeah, great job,
It's been a
Elise.
great experience.
thank you.
Okay, go celebrate.
Okay,
Yes.
all right.
Congratulations.
Safely.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.